Craigslist offer. Strange, how something as innocent as a Craigslist ad can change everything. One simple decision, and suddenly you're standing at the edge of something you can't undo. That's how it started for me anyway, one innocent search. It was a Thursday night, around 9 p.m., and I was aimlessly scrolling through Craigslist, looking for an old record player. I had recently inherited a small vinyl collection from my grandfather, and I wanted something vintage to play his records on. I wasn't expecting anything too fancy, just a simple player in decent condition. The one thing I was certain of was that I didn't want to spend a lot of money. After all, it was Craigslist. Deals were meant to be made. Then I saw the listing. Vintage turntable free to a good home. I paused. That caught my attention. Free? That was either a scam or it was exactly what I was looking for. The ad was sparse, offering no details except for a brief description. In good condition. Must be picked up by tonight. No holds. The address was listed, just a couple of miles from my apartment. I felt a chill run down my spine, but curiosity got the better of me. Who gives away vintage items for free? And why the urgency? Still, it wasn't like I had anything to lose. I hit reply and sent a simple message. Hi, I'm interested in the turntable. Is it still available? I can pick it up tonight. Almost immediately, I received a response. It read, "It's yours. Come by and I'll leave the door unlocked. 2117 Woodrow Avenue. Be here before midnight." I didn't think much of it. It wasn't a usual Craigslist transaction, but I convinced myself that it was probably just a seller eager to get rid of something they didn't need anymore. Maybe they were moving. It didn't matter. I grabbed my keys and headed out. The night was cold, the air crisp as I drove through the city, feeling the weight of the winter wind pressing against my car. The streets were quieter than usual, with barely any cars in sight. When I turned onto Woodrow Avenue, I knew instantly that something was off. The houses on the street were old Victorian, in fact, but there was something about the way they stood, so close together, their windows dark and covered in grime, that made me uneasy. It felt like the street was trapped in time, a place where life had passed by and left only shadows in its wake. I arrived at the address, a large, dilapidated house near the end of the block. The porch light was on, flickering, as though it had been struggling to stay on for years. I pulled up in front of the house and parked, but as I sat there, something gnawed at me. The house was silent. There were no sounds of movement or life inside, no hint of activity, just that eerie stillness. For a moment I hesitated, felt wrong, but the turntable was free and I wasn't going to pass up a deal like that. I took a deep breath, grabbed my flashlight, and walked up the creaky steps to the front door. The lock had already been undone, and the door swung open with a groan. "Hello," I called out, stepping inside. There was no response. The air inside smelled stale, like old wood and dust, and the floorboards creaked beneath my feet. The house was dark, save for the dim light spilling from the hallway. I felt a slight shiver run through me, but I ignored it. This was just an old house, that's all. I called out again, a little louder this time. "I'm here for the turntable." No answer. I looked down the hallway, where a faint light flickered from a room at the far end. I decided to check it out, figuring that maybe the seller was in there. As I walked down the hall, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was silly, right? No one was here. But still, I couldn't help the creeping sense of dread that settled in my gut. When I reached the room, the door was ajar. I knocked lightly, just to announce my presence, but there was no response. I pushed the door open slowly. Inside was a large, dusty living room with old furniture covered in sheets. The turntable sat in the corner, its polished wood gleaming in the faint light. But something was wrong. There was no one in the room, no seller, no living person at all. I felt my heart race. My skin prickled with unease. "Hello," I called again, but this time my voice cracked. My eyes scanned the room, and that's when I noticed something chilling. A piece of paper, lying on the floor, right next to the turntable. It was a note, written in messy, hurried handwriting. "Don't touch it. Don't play it. It's cursed. A cold wave of panic washed over me. I stepped back, my hands trembling. What the hell was this? A prank? The thought crossed my mind, but it didn't feel like a joke. I felt a chill sweep over me, the air turning icy, and I glanced at the turntable. It was almost as if it was calling to me, begging me to touch it. I stepped closer, against my better judgment, and reached out to pick up the note. But before my fingers could even brush the paper, I heard something. A sound. A low, guttural noise that seemed to come from deep within the house. My breath caught in my throat. The sound was coming closer, moving through the walls, the floor. It was like something was crawling toward me. Slowly, deliberately. I froze. The noise grew louder, and then I heard footsteps, but they weren't human. No, this was something much worse. It sounded like something scraping along the floor, dragging itself forward. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I was rooted to the spot. I felt like I was trapped, like I couldn't escape, even though the door was right behind me. Then the lights flickered, and then the room went dark. I whipped around, my flashlight now my only source of light. I swung it wildly, my heart hammering in my chest. That's when I saw it, a figure standing in the doorway. A woman. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken. Her hair hung in matted strands, covering half of her face. She didn't move, but I could feel her presence in the air, pressing down on me, suffocating me. "Leave," she whispered, her voice hollow, like it was coming from somewhere far away. I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted for the door, my breath ragged as I stumbled over the floor. The moment I crossed the threshold, I slammed the door shut behind me and ran for my car, barely thinking as I jumped in and started the engine. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling from what I just witnessed. But even as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. That woman's face, her voice. When I got back to my apartment, I checked my phone. I had a new message. It was from the Craigslist seller, "Mark, you shouldn't have come. It's already too late. You touched it. It knows you now." I dropped my phone, my hands trembling. The room seemed colder now. The walls felt tighter. And in the silence, I thought I heard something. A low, scraping noise. Something was coming. The lost ad. I never thought Craigslist would be the thing that would haunt my nightmares. I used it like everyone else, searching for deals, looking for furniture, used electronics, random knickknacks, and anything that was cheap. But that night, in the dead of winter, I made the mistake of responding to an ad that would lead me down a path I never could have predicted. It all started with a simple listing for a used fridge. I had just moved into my new apartment in a less than great part of town. The apartment was small and I had minimal furniture, but it was cheap, and at that point, that was all that mattered. The one thing I needed, though, was a refrigerator. The landlord had promised me a new one, but after weeks of waiting and sending texts that were left unanswered, I took matters into my own hands. So, there it was, a Craigslist ad for a like-new fridge listed for a price that seemed too good to be true. The seller, a person named Mark, had only a short description. Moving out of state, need it gone today. Great condition, first come, first served. I hesitated. Something about it felt off. But then again, everything about my apartment felt off. It was always too quiet, too still. I figured a cheap fridge was worth the risk. I shot off a quick email, and within minutes, I got a response. Still available. Meet me at 8 p.m. tonight, 212 Blackwood Avenue. It's in the basement. Just knock when you get here. I double-checked the address. Blackwood Avenue wasn't far from my place, but it was on the edge of a neighborhood that felt wrong. The streetlights seemed a little dimmer there, the houses a little more run down, but I shrugged it off. I was desperate. The clock hit 7:30, and I figured I should head out. I threw on my coat, grabbed my keys, and left my apartment. The drive was uneventful, though every turn felt like it was pulling me deeper into an unsettling part of town. The houses here were larger than mine, but neglected, windows boarded up, front lawns overgrown, and old cars rusting on the curb. Blackwood Avenue was no exception. The house at 212 was at the end of the street, set back from the road. It looked abandoned. There were no lights on, not even a porch light to guide me. I parked my car and sat there for a moment, staring at the house. The cold seemed to seep into the air, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. But I needed that fridge, and I couldn't afford to back out now. I walked up the cracked, weed-infested driveway and knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, this time louder. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a dark interior. "Hello," I called out, stepping inside. The air inside was stale, and there was a strange smell, like mildew and something else, something metallic. The house was eerily quiet. The furniture was sparse, with only a few chairs and an old coffee table. The walls were bare, covered in scuff marks and faded paint. But what really stood out was the silence. There was no sound of a television, no music playing in the background, no hum of a refrigerator, just an oppressive, suffocating silence. "Mark?" I called again, my voice echoing slightly. I stepped further into the hallway, my boots clicking against the hardwood floor. There was a faint light coming from downstairs, so I headed toward it. I could hear a faint, steady hum now, like the sound of an appliance running. The fridge. It had to be. I descended the stairs slowly, every step creaking under my weight. The light grew brighter as I reached the bottom. The basement was dimly lit, with a single exposed bulb hanging from the ceiling. And there it was, the fridge. It sat against the far wall, its silver exterior gleaming in the dim light. But something was wrong. The air around it felt colder, too cold. And there was a strange noise coming from it, like a muffled scratching sound. I froze, staring at the fridge. The noise stopped, but the cold seemed to grow more intense. My breath became visible in the air. "Mark?" I called out again, but my voice faltered this time. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I was starting to regret coming here. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows near the fridge. I jumped back, my pulse racing. It was a man, tall and thin, with dark hair and a gaunt face. He was wearing a faded plaid shirt and jeans, his hands trembling as he held them out in front of him. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. "You're here for the fridge?" he asked in a hoarse voice, like he hadn't spoken in a long time. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, I'm here to pick it up." The man didn't move. He just stared at me, and for a moment, I thought he wasn't going to say anything else. But then he spoke again, his voice even more unsettling. "It's in the fridge," he said quietly. I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "I just need the fridge. I'm not here for anything weird." The man's lips twitched into a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No, it's in the fridge. You need to take it. You need to take it before it's too late." I felt a sudden chill run through me. "What are you talking about? I'm just here for the fridge, man. Let's just finish this and I'll go." But he didn't move. Instead, he pointed at the fridge with a shaking hand. "It's in there. Take it." The scratching noise came again, louder this time, like something was trying to escape from inside the fridge. My blood ran cold. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and bolted for the stairs, my heart hammering in my chest. Behind me, I heard the man's voice calling out, "You can't leave. You have to take it. You're the one who wanted it." I didn't look back. I ran up the stairs, through the dark hallway, and out the door. My hands were shaking as I fumbled with my keys, but I finally managed to get into my car. I slammed the door shut, the engine roaring to life as I sped off, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. When I got home, I checked my phone, trying to calm my racing mind. But my heart stopped when I saw the latest message from Mark. It was short with just a link attached. "It's already too late." I clicked the link. It was a video. The video was shot in that same basement. I could see the fridge, and then the camera moved toward it. Inside the fridge were several bags, blood-stained bags. The scratching noise returned, louder this time, as something shifted inside. And then, in the corner of the frame, I saw the man's face. His eyes were wide, his mouth open in a silent scream. The video ended with a message. "I told you not to come." I deleted the video, but the image of that man's face stayed with me. I knew, deep down, that I had narrowly escaped something much darker than I'd ever imagined. And I knew that I would never again trust an ad on Craigslist. The Craigslist deal that went wrong. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, especially after months of scouring Craigslist for cheap, secondhand furniture. I'd recently moved into a new place in a quiet neighborhood and was trying to furnish it on a tight budget. The apartment was nice enough, though it had an eerie, almost unnatural quietness to it, which I thought was just a side effect of living on the outskirts of town. What I wasn't expecting was that one simple Craigslist deal would throw me into a nightmare I'd never forget. It started innocently enough, too innocently. I was browsing Craigslist late one night, hoping to find a used sofa or a coffee table. That's when I saw it. A listing for a leather couch in perfect condition, listed for a price far below what it should have been. The ad was vague, simply stating that the seller was moving out of state and needed to get rid of the furniture quickly. There was no contact number, just an email, which should have been my first red flag. I sent an email and within minutes I got a reply. Couch still available. Can meet tomorrow at 7 p.m. at the address listed below. It's in the garage, so feel free to take a look before making any decisions. The address was for a house about 20 minutes away from mine, tucked deep into a part of town I wasn't too familiar with. But I thought, hey, it's just a couch. No big deal. I could always leave if things felt off. So I agreed to the time and planned my trip. The next evening, I set out in my car. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, eerie shadows on the winding streets. The neighborhood felt off-kilter, but that was nothing new. I turned onto a quiet street lined with large, old homes, the kind with overgrown lawns and rusted gates. When I reached the house in the listing, I saw that it was tucked back behind a row of tall hedges. The driveway was empty, save for an old, dusty sedan parked at the far end. I parked on the curb, took a deep breath, and walked up to the front door. I rang the bell, but there was no answer. The sound of the bell echoed through the house, followed by a long, almost unsettling silence. After a moment, I heard footsteps from behind the house, slow, deliberate steps. A man appeared from the side yard, wearing a plaid shirt, jeans, and worn-out boots. His hair was dark, and his face was gaunt, almost sickly. He looked like someone who hadn't seen daylight in far too long. "You here for the couch?" he asked, his voice soft and raspy. I nodded, trying to mask my unease. "Yeah, that's me. I'm looking for a good deal." "Well, come on around back. It's in the garage. Just make sure you don't mind the mess," he said, turning without waiting for a response. I followed him around the side of the house, my nerves tightening. The backyard was overgrown with weeds and old furniture was scattered around like someone had just abandoned it. There was a shed at the far end of the yard, and I couldn't help but notice that the windows on the house were all boarded up, as though the place had been empty for a while. He led me into the garage, and that's when I saw it. The couch. It was indeed beautiful, an immaculate leather sectional with deep brown tones that almost shimmered in the dim light. It seemed like a steal. "Go ahead," the man said, motioning to the couch. "Take a seat. See how you like it." I hesitated, but then shrugged and sat down. It was comfortable, far more so than I expected, and I began to relax a little. Maybe I was just overthinking things. The man leaned against the wall, his arms folded across his chest. "So, what's your name?" I asked, trying to make small talk to ease my tension. "Name's Frank," he replied without much enthusiasm. "Just moved in a few months ago, but now I'm heading out. My work's taking me elsewhere." "Ah, I see. What kind of work?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation going. He didn't answer right away. Instead, his eyes seemed to drift toward the far corner of the garage, where a large old wooden crate sat against the wall. I noticed something strange about it, like it didn't belong there, like it had been carefully placed but never touched. "Anyway," Frank finally said, snapping my attention back to him, "you still interested in the couch?" I nodded, but something felt off. It wasn't just the odd behavior or the strange way he was avoiding my questions. It was the feeling that something was wrong with this whole situation. Why hadn't he mentioned anything about a price? Why was he acting so distant? I stood up, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I think I'll pass on this one, I said, trying to mask my growing anxiety. Frank didn't move. Instead, he gave a tight smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. I'm afraid you can't leave just yet. A chill ran through me. The door to the garage suddenly felt miles away. What do you mean? You see, Frank said, stepping closer, this isn't just a regular sale. This is more of a favor. You're going to take the couch with you. And if you don't, things are going to get messy. Before I could react, I heard the creaking sound of something heavy moving behind me. I turned to see a large, metal door that I hadn't noticed before slowly opening. Behind it, I saw a row of old, stained furniture piled up in the corner. But in the middle of the pile was a body, cold, lifeless, and covered in a black tarp. My stomach turned, and I backed away, heart pounding in my chest. Don't worry, Frank said, his voice suddenly much colder. It's not you I'm worried about, but I need you to help me out. All right? Just a small favor for a guy like me. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I turned and bolted for the door, my heart racing. I could hear Frank's voice calling after me, but I didn't look back. I pushed open the door, stumbled out into the yard, and ran toward my car. I don't know what came over me, but I slammed the car into gear and peeled out of there as fast as I could, not caring about the road ahead, only about escaping whatever dark thing I had stumbled into. The next morning, I checked the Craigslist ad again. The listing was gone, as if it had never existed. But in the back of my mind, I knew there was something deeply wrong about that house. That man, Frank, he wasn't just moving. He was hiding something far worse than I could ever have imagined. And I had almost walked right into it. The Craigslist job. I was desperate for cash. My rent was overdue, my credit cards were maxed out, and my fridge was practically empty. That's how I ended up on Craigslist at 2 a.m., scrolling through job listings that ranged from sketchy to outright illegal. Then I saw it. Night work, easy cash, $500 per hour. The description was vague, seeking a responsible individual for overnight tasks. No experience needed. Must be discreet. Transportation provided. A phone number was listed. No email. No name. I hesitated, but $500 an hour? Even if it was some weird cleaning gig, I could make a few grand in one night. So I texted the number. Is the job still available? The reply came instantly. Yes. Pick up at 10 p.m. 477 Oak Ridge Drive. Wear black. No questions. Everything about it screamed, don't do this. But desperation makes you ignore red flags. So at 9:55 p.m., I was there. The ride. The address led to a parking lot behind an abandoned strip mall. No streetlights. No cameras. A black SUV idled near the entrance. The windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. Before I could second-guess myself, the back door opened. A man sat in the driver's seat, wearing a dark hoodie and gloves. His face was completely covered by a black mask. Get in. His voice was flat, emotionless. I did. The doors locked automatically. We drove in silence. The city lights faded behind us. No GPS, no street signs, just endless, winding roads into nowhere. Then finally we stopped. I looked out the window. A house. Not just any house, a mansion. 3 stories tall, old, with tall iron gates and no lights on inside. The driver handed me a folded note. Go inside. Do not speak. Do not turn on the lights. Do not go upstairs. I opened my mouth to ask something, but he cut me off. Follow the instructions and you'll be paid. Break them and you won't leave. The hairs on my arms stood up. Then the locks clicked open. Inside the house. The second I stepped inside, the SUV drove off, leaving me alone. The place smelled old, stale, like dust and something else, something rotten. The furniture was covered in sheets. The air was thick, heavy. I could hear the distant creak of wood settling, but it felt like something else was moving. I checked my phone. No signal. There was a single candle burning on a small table in the hallway. Next to it was a notebook. I opened it. Rule 1, do not speak. Rule 2, do not turn on the lights. Rule 3, do not go upstairs. I gripped the edges of the book. Then, at the bottom of the page, in fresh ink, a new line appeared. He knows you're here, not alone. A floorboard creaked. I spun around, heart pounding. Nothing. The candle flickered. The shadows on the walls moved, not like normal shadows, but like they were watching. I took a slow breath. It's just an old house. Then I heard it. A voice, faint, from upstairs. A woman, crying. I squeezed my eyes shut. Do not go upstairs. But what if someone needed help? Another whisper, closer this time. Help me. I turned toward the staircase. Something moved at the top. A shadow, tall, thin, wrong. It disappeared into the hallway above. I took a step forward. Then another. I reached the first step, and the notebook slammed shut. The warning. The candle went out. I was plunged into darkness. Then a sound, slow breathing. Not mine. Close. Right next to me. I backed away, my hands shaking. The notebook flipped open again. New words had appeared. You are breaking the rules. I turned and bolted toward the front door. It wouldn't budge. Then, from upstairs, footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming down the stairs. I pressed myself against the wall. My breath caught in my throat. A shape appeared at the top of the staircase. Not a person. Not even close. It was tall, too tall, with elongated limbs and a head that tilted at an unnatural angle. And its eyes, black holes, smiled. Then it spoke, but it used my voice. Where are you going? The chase. I ran. A door to the right, a kitchen. I dove inside, slamming the door shut behind me. The thing laughed. Slow, deliberate footsteps approached the door. Then scratching. Long, slow scratches down the wood. I gripped the notebook, my hands slick with sweat. I flipped through the pages, desperate for something, anything. Then I saw it. A new rule. If you break the rules, write your name in the book. It will take someone else instead. I stared at the blank line below the text. A pen was tucked inside the spine. Outside, the scratching stopped. The thing spoke again, its voice now mimicking my mother's. Sweetheart, let me in. I squeezed my eyes shut. The choice. The door rattled. I had seconds. My name. If I wrote it, would I be free? Another option. Someone else's name. My mind raced. Then outside silence. A new line appeared in the book. Time's up. The door burst open. Aftermath. I woke up in my car. Sunlight streamed through the windshield. My phone buzzed. Payment notification. $3,000 deposited. I turned to look at the house. It was gone. Just an empty field. Then my phone buzzed again. A text. Job complete. You're free to go. I let out a shaky breath. Maybe I had imagined everything. But then I saw it. The notebook, sitting in the passenger seat, with a new name written inside. Not mine. And below it, we will call you again soon.